Welcome, my friends, to the Sage of Quay Radio Hour, your home for free and critical thinking, and I'm your host, Mike Williams. Derek Hess, who is the host of WCSB's underrated radio show out of Cleveland, Ohio, invited me and anti-geoengineering activist Jolie Diane to join Derek to take his audience through the reality of the geoengineering agenda and Jolie's efforts to stop the program via the legislative process. And so without further ado, here's the show with Derek.
This is going to be Chemtrail 101. Number one, well, what's the difference between a chemtrail and a contrail?
Well, a contrail, Derek, is water vapor. So if we go back, I know you and I are about the same age. If we go back in time, if we remember looking up at the sky and seeing an airplane, we would see a short vapor trail behind that plane.
Mm-hmm.
And it would disappear quickly within maybe, 30 seconds to a minute or so. Chemtrails are very different. Chemtrails are not water vapor. Chemtrails are actual chemicals, what is referred to as particulates, that are being emitted from the planes through sprayers and spraying the sky with chemicals. And the three primary chemicals that are being found in tests are aluminum, barium, and strontium. Those are the three. There are others, but those are the three primaries. And Jolie can talk about this to a much greater detail because she and her team and her colleagues have done a lot of work with testing. So that's the difference. And when you take a look at these chemtrails, these aerosols, and what we actually refer to it as geoengineering, because chemtrails as a term actually was created by the Air Force going back 2 or 3 decades ago, but they have tagged conspiracy theorists with the word chemtrails. So we prefer to use geoengineering or aerosol spraying. And so when these planes spray, what you'll notice is that the spraying does not dissipate within 30 seconds, a minute or so. It actually lasts for hours.
It widens, too.
And it widens, and what's happening is then you have this tremendous cloud cover within a couple of hours. So many folks, I've done this myself. I'm in Raleigh, North Carolina. They spray here like there's no tomorrow. You can step outside at 8 o'clock in the morning, 8:30, 9 o'clock or whatever, take a look at the sky, and you'll start to see these planes will start flying. And the sky at that point in time is usually relatively blue. By the time these guys are done spraying, by about noon, 1 o'clock, we have what I refer to as a whiteout. So your beautiful blue sky is now turned into this overcast, milky white type of sky. And that's the difference. And what's happened, Derek, is that the program that's in place has been in place for at least 20 years. I'm going to say the late 1990s is when I first became aware of it. It's 2017 now, so we're talking about 20 years. It's a covert program. The government says nothing about it. They deny it. When they do talk about geoengineering, they talk about it as something in future state. They never admit to the fact that it's going on and has been going on for the last 20 years or so. So that's the difference.
When you speak of the government, this would be administration after administration after administration. So it wouldn't be Democrat or Republican or whatever it may be, the flavor of the 4-year cycle. It encompasses more than that.
Right. So what we have is it's referred to as the deep state. And it's the military-industrial complex. It's the CIA. So we're talking about functions or entities that are behind the curtain. So when you talk about your president, you talk about the Congress, we talk about all that stuff. That's theater in front of the curtain. And the permanent government, the permanent structure that is always in place, think of it in terms of like the Great Oz. And what I would like to do is have Jolie talk more about this because she really has done a great job of understanding the underpinnings of the deep state and their involvement in this. So Jolie, why don't you just give Derek a little background on that?
Yeah, please.
Thanks, Mike. Yeah, happy to do so. And until now, we haven't had any kind of a mechanism to take down the geoengineering until Rhode Island recently. And Rhode Island did just introduce the Geoengineering Act of 2017. And basically, geoengineering is defined herein as the intentional manipulation of the environment involving nuclear, biological, chemical, electromagnetic, and/or physical agent activities that affect changes to Earth's atmosphere and/or surface. So we do have it defined in the so-called government because we are part of the government. We've just been absent in the process. And therefore, we've had for decades as Mike was calling out, we've had this deep state that's really been the organizing principle of our society. And everywhere we look, it's the militarization of humanity. And this is no different. The United States is also dealing with Agenda 21, and these programs are very much part of Agenda 21.
What is Agenda 21?
Well, that's basically a plan for world government that George Bush Sr. signed in 1991.
Mm-hmm.
And basically it relinquishes the sovereignty of the United States into the greater body of the United Nations. And the way that we can see that has played out, as you said, Derek, over the course, the continuum of the administrations. We see the same policies just continuing. So it doesn't really matter who's like the happy smiling face puppet in the White House. What we've gotten is these policies that are basically designed to break down the countries and foster this one world government run by, the Rockefellers, the Rothschilds, your Bill Gates. It's ingrained in our architecture. And so that's what we're trying to do as caring and concerned people, to get involved in the policy making, because we can stop pollution, but we have to call it out what it is. And these programs are very vulnerable because they have miles of documentation following them for geoengineering, weather modification. Weathermodificationhistory.com is a great place to go to just kind of get a grip on the fact that these programs have been going on for a very, very long time. And as Mike said, they're military research and development programs that just have gone on, underneath the radar. And now what we have in our skies is geoengineering with international governance being attempted to orchestrate it.
Now the big question everybody would have is why?
Yeah, well, everybody, that's a great question, and everybody should be asking that question, Derek. So what I'll do, Jolie, let me just take a shot at it, and then you can chime in. The first thing, Derek, is when we talk about the military-industrial complex, we're talking about it's a military weapon. It's controlling the weather. So what the government, the deep state government, is doing is think of it as they are wiring the sky. So think of these aerosols. It's called ionizing the atmosphere. So when they ionize the atmosphere, they're charging it. So this allows them to be able to do things technology-wise through frequencies and so on, to be able to weaponize the atmosphere for military purposes. So that's one big primary reason why they're doing this. The other one is when you control the weather, you're also able to capitalize on what they refer to as disaster capitalism. So to give you an example of that, many of our hurricanes, if not all of them in recent history, I would say over the last 10 years or so, I'm putting a stake in the ground, are man-made. So what that means is they're able to create these hurricanes, and they're able to pulse these weather patterns when they initiate them with frequencies, and these frequencies allow the storm to get larger or get smaller. Now, when a hurricane makes its way up the East Coast, as an example, behind it lays waste. So when it lays waste and it destroys homes and businesses and roads and bridges and so on and so forth, what happens is there's an economic benefit to the deep state. There's an economic benefit to the New World Order. Because, right, so now they have to rebuild homes, they have to rebuild infrastructure of roads and bridges, and so they reap the benefit of disaster. So there's an economic benefit to controlling the weather along with the military aspect of it. Also, the military utilizes these aerosols. I have a YouTube video going back to 1952. It's a Navy declassified video where they talk about the importance of aerosols for biological warfare. So another reason why they would be involved in this type of dispersal is that they could be testing biological warfare capabilities. And history has plenty of examples where the military, both ours and the UK is another prime example, where they have sprayed their population to test the impact of these aerosols or viruses or germs or whatever it is that they're spraying to see what the fallout is, how many people get sick, how many people wind up in hospitals, and so on. So that's another aspect of it. The other piece of it is that a lot of people are concerned about vaccines, as an example, and mandatory or forced vaccines. Another purpose for the aerosols could be that they don't have to worry about forced vaccines. Whatever it is that they want to have the population intake, all they need to do is spray it into the air. And then all you need to do is breathe. And once you breathe it all in, it's in your body.
The areas that are being done over the continental United States, I'm looking out my window here at the radio station because I knew we'd be talking about this. And there's some suspicious lines up there. And it is kind of a soupy white sky. Right. And so Raleigh, apparently, you living there, that's a hard target, apparently, by you seeing so much. Do they spray the same amount over the entire continental United States, and are they spraying them in places like, let's say, North Korea?
All the NATO countries are involved in this. So it's not just the continental United States. So we have, Jolie and I have colleagues and friends throughout the world. So we have friends in the UK, in France, in Spain, in the Netherlands, in South America, and so on. And these aerosols, for sure, are in all of the NATO countries. And there are certain areas geographically where they spray more. Now, why is that? I can't be definitive on that. The only thing I can assume or make an assumption on is that certain areas, based upon the jet stream and what they want to do with the weather, are prime. So there's a lot of spraying on the East Coast. There's a lot of spraying on the East Coast, and there was a lot of spraying over the West Coast. This is why California, for several years, had gone through a very severe drought. And people who were involved in the geoengineering activism and the researchers were clearly documenting how the spraying was diverting the weather patterns, diverting the rain away from California, as an example, and sending it elsewhere. So, I mean, these things are going on, and these things are documented as far as the capabilities to do this. I mean, just to use an example, going back to the Vietnam War, the United States government was involved in, I believe it was called Project Popeye, where they were fostering rain. They were spraying the sky in order to bring a lot of rain down on to the enemy in Vietnam in order to make it very difficult for the enemy to operate. So, I mean, so there's a lot of examples where, this has been going on for a very long time. It's just that it's one thing going back to the 1960s and you're dealing with just creating rain to what they're doing today. It's way beyond just creating rain now. So I hope I answered your question. Yeah. And of course, now, like whenever I speak to you, questions just come flying in. And this is maybe a little bit off in the subject, but Tesla using electricity with the environment, did that help to inspire this kind of thing, or am I way off? No, you're not way off. In fact, I'll have Jolie come in and talk about this. We're really talking about, when we talk about Tesla technology, we're talking about things, the facilities like HARP out of Alaska, where it's frequency-based technology. So, I know, Jolie, would you like to talk about that a little bit?
I sort of wanted to go back to what you were saying on the deliberate breakdown of the country. Why are they spraying? And we have to just go back to the fact that they want the GMOs. And Bill Gates is heavily involved in investing in geoengineering and GMOs. And our highest reading that we got back from a lab test was recently in Illinois, far past the readings that we've been getting around the country. And we've been getting high readings. But this was like 10,000 aluminum, 19,000 sulfur, over 100 barium. I mean, so, and when I talk to our colleagues and friends in Illinois, they're doing the GMOs there. I mean, so what's really happening? They're breaking down the economy deliberately in order to create a new industry with the GMOs. So that's part of it, how it ties in economically to what they're doing. This is a deliberate thing. This is a war that they're doing. We're far past
just quickly, GMOs are?
The genetically modified food.
Yeah, this is food, Derek. It's not organic. This is food that is basically made in a lab. The spraying that's taking place is having a severe effect on the organic food, the ability for plant life to be healthy. And many parts of the country, they're seeing this where trees are dying and so on. But let me just, Jolie, let me just get real quickly. Let me just hit on Derek's question about the Tesla technology.
Yeah, for the Tesla.
I'll just say something and you can tack on. It's an antenna array, and what they do is they focus at very high intensity frequencies into the ionosphere. And by doing this, what they're able to do is they're able to affect the weather based upon the ionization or the charging of the atmosphere by the spraying. Now, the other thing is I want people to also understand is it's not just these big facilities like HARP, as an example, that are doing this. All of these cell towers that are popping up overnight. I always joke around with people. I always say, have you ever seen a cell tower actually built? Yeah, they just seem to pop up overnight. They just, right? They're there. They're all over the place.
No, you're right. Actually, I know property owners make a lot of money having one on his property.
Exactly. So people are being bought to be able to participate in this. Those cell towers that you're seeing have nothing to do with improving your cell phone reception. Nothing. Those cell towers are being used. They're basically frequency transmitters and receivers. That's what they're doing. And it has nothing to do with the transmitting of your cell phone. It has to do with technology that the deep state's involved in. And so the ionization or the charging, the wiring of the atmosphere that I talked about before is playing a huge part in your ability to be able to roll out that technology. And what is that technology used for? It could be used for any number of things, and a lot of things we don't even know. But one of the things is, the surveillance state, as an example, being able to track. This is what they like to do. They like to control. They like to track. They like to know where you are, who you are, and surveil you to death. So that's just one aspect of it. But in any case, Jolie, I didn't mean to interrupt there. I just wanted to make sure we answered that question. Did you anything else you wanted to say about the towers and HARP?
The HARP technology and all this, injecting the metallic aerosols is part of it, as you were saying. And so that means that the atmosphere is conductive, and that means that we are conductive as well. And so we are impacted by the new technology of 5G, which is, as I was telling Mike earlier, the overlapping technology of where they're deploying all of these apparatus and antennas for, you think, cell phone, your 5G, but what it is it's microwave radiation waves. And it's harmful for bees, it's harmful for us, and it's just another one of these technologies like GMOs, just getting rolled out on the public without any concern for biology or health impacts or environmental impacts, none of it. It's a business, as you know.
And that's what's happening right now.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. The 5G is a related technology. I was very concerned when I learned about geoengineering, and then I looked over and I saw these towers, and I was like, oh my God, that's part of this too? Oh no. And now I'm working with scientists for wired technologies, and we're trying to stop the 5G, the S19, which is, again, this deployment of these microwave frequencies. Again, we can't be free if we're going to be blanketed in microwave frequencies. None of us can. Or if we have to breathe geoengineering, it's impossible to be free that way. That's why liberty is so much at stake here for people, because you don't have a choice if you're walking down the street or you're just sitting in your house and you're just getting blanketed with this harmful radiation. And it's not as much like, is it the heating aspect of it? No, it's the overtime. It's the pulse radiation nature of it, the pulse frequencies that hit you. It's not good for nature, not good for biology. That's why we're seeing the disappearance of the bees. And, we can wire everything with fiber optics and have fast, safe, harmless internet, by just digging in the ground. And that's the way we have to go for the solution to that. There's, we don't have to miss out on the technology. We just have to make it safe so we don't fry ourselves,
Yeah, and the thing is, Derek, because you can't see a frequency, most people, because you can't see it, they think it's harmless. And humans are very susceptible to these frequencies. And, the government has programs and technology where they're able to direct certain frequencies at people or a population and able to change their moods. You can make somebody happy. You can make somebody sad. You can make somebody lethargic. You can make somebody have a cloudy mind. I mean, this is all technology that the military has at its disposal as we speak.
Man, they have a cloudy mind ray directly on me 24 hours. they got me. I need an aluminum foil hat. I'm telling you.
Well, I'm just saying that, people, because they think they can't see it, it's harmless. And I'm telling you, folks, these frequencies, you're swimming in a pool of EMF, electromagnetic frequencies. You're swimming in it.
A question of mine, too, is you said the NATO nations are doing this and doing it in certain areas heavier than others. Do you think they're doing it on borders of, like, Russia in hopes that the clouds would drift over into their airspace?
I would assume that is definitely taking place. I mean, I don't see how they wouldn't be doing something like that, especially when you think of it in terms of being a military technology, a military weapon. I would think that that's not out of the question.
Now, would our adversaries have the same technology?
Absolutely. And we have to remember that the air is all connected, just like water is. So we can't really say, oh, we're spraying over there. Eventually it's all just one organism, the earth, And so any spraying anywhere is going to have an impact on all of us. And then again, it's conductive. They're ionizing the atmosphere, which shouldn't be happening. Again, these people are so liable for damages to our health and to our environment. And it's just something that's been going on for decades. So, if something's been in motion, it's very hard to tackle it. But it's not impossible, and we're doing it now.
Now, we here in Cleveland, we live on Lake Erie. We're very blessed to be on this large source of fresh water. And last year, over on the Toledo end of the lake, it had this huge algae bloom. I mean, the water was green, and they were blaming it on runoff from agricultural fertilization. Do you think that might have anything to do with what's going on?
Yeah, absolutely. They're doing just experiments in the environment and on the climate. And a lot of these programs, geoengineering, climate engineering, is designed to change the weather and the climate. I mean, that's what it's for. And we don't know what the impacts are and what all of these programs together are doing. It's causing harm, basically. And so what we have to do is one by one take out these polluting and toxic industries, and it's exactly going after the deep state, like we were saying before. These are the people that are pushing these programs. They're the organizing principle of society, and that's why we have to be really diligent to keep prying and questioning and correcting this.
Okay, another question of mine, which I'm sure other folks have, is if it's such a huge project, there's a huge amount of people involved to make it happen. And how come some of these pilots and people inside, and people making the chemicals and people are dumping it out of the back of the jets and stuff, why have none of them really come forward?
Well, I think it's easy to keep a secret if people are in secret societies and don't have allegiance to the United States. Maybe they're afraid that they're going to get killed for coming out and saying anything. I mean, it's pretty easy. If someone's threatening your family, are you gonna make trouble? No. And a lot of these politicians and stuff, they're blackmailed already. I mean, they've been set up. They can't tell the truth.
Yeah, it's very compartmentalized, Derek. So, when you work for a very large company, let's like a multinational corporation, one of the military industrial complex companies, let's say like Raytheon or Halliburton as an example, you could be working on something, but you're working on it, just your piece of it. But you don't see the whole picture. You don't see the full picture. And this is what they do. The government and the military industrial complex, these large multinational corporations that are involved in military technology, they're all compartmentalized. Now, so you don't see, like I said, you don't see the big picture. And Jolie just touched on it before. Another big piece of this is that there are non-disclosures and confidentiality agreements that are signed. You can't say anything. Because if you say something and you sign a non-disclosure, you're working on a top secret program as an example, and then you figure it out and you say, you know what, this is wrong, I don't like this. What's going to happen is you're going to wind up in court. You're going to wind up with a monumental legal issue, and people just avoid it because they've got people basically pigeonholed. They're basically boxed in where it is, hey, look, I can't give up my job. I've got a mortgage, I've got kids, I've got a wife, I've got, this and that. I've got to pay my bills.
I got houses to rebuild from the hurricane.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So people don't say anything, and there have been whistleblowers that have come out. But what happens is when somebody comes out and talks about, like there was one gal, I forgot her name, Jolie. She was on the military base, and she was involved in procuring I'm sorry?
Kristen Megan, I think.
Kristen Megan had come out a few years ago, and she was on a military base, and she was explaining how she was involved. I think it was in procuring the products or the chemicals used for the spraying. But what happens, Derek, is these people become vilified. The tables get turned on them. They are called conspiracy theorists, conspiratards, tinfoil hat wearers. So what they do is they attack them right away. Now, if you're somebody who has very thick skin, you're able to weather that storm, then what happens is then the threats come. All right? And, you know, these things, this is how it works. And I know a lot of people probably think this is like a James Bond movie or some kind of novel, but this is how the deep state works. They're not nice people. They're not good people. They're not going to sit there and put their arm around you and pat you on the head and say, "Guy, we really would like you not to talk about that if that's okay." You know? So what's going to happen is they're going to go after you. So again, the biggest piece of it is it's compartmentalized. And the military is compartmentalized. These multinational corporations are compartmentalized, and so is the government. And so the only people that really know what's going on are the people that are sitting in the boardrooms in the corner office at the very top of the building, and, you know, that know all the pieces and how it comes together. So that's why a lot of people, you know, you don't see a lot of people stepping forward. And again, compartmentalization and the fear factor. Well, if I speak up, I'm going to lose my job.
Right.
And so people basically hunker down and they say, well, somebody else will talk about it. Somebody else will bring it to the forefront. Somebody else will do it on our behalf. And what happens is nobody steps forward that really, you know, that can really make an impact. And so this issue of geoengineering continues to go on unabated.
Well, Jolie, you are stepping forward and working in Rhode Island over this.
Yeah, a lot of us have been really getting busy and inspired because this bill that's in Rhode Island was written by the primary author was Rosalind Peterson, who is a very well-respected and just great expert on geoengineering. She spoke at the UN. She was one of the primary authors on this, and basically the thing is a template, meant to be a template for every state. So what we can do, what I'm doing is I'm working with different activists, whoever wants to work on it, you know, people who are serious and have some time to, you know, visit some offices, make some phone calls. We're working in different states, changing over the document so that it's state specific. And we're even working in different countries, you know, with activists to start getting this approach down in their countries. Because basically all it is articulating our demands and creating a mechanism to rein in this technology and put a roadblock in front of it. So yeah, I'm really excited about it. I've talked to activists who are working in Washington State, Florida, New Jersey, New York, Illinois. I hope Ohio. We've had 20 tests so far, and every single one of them has turned out with the geoengineering footprint: aluminum, barium, strontium, and sulfur.
Well, our Great Lakes have got to be full of them too, then.
Yeah. Again, like Mike was saying, in the 90s, this started, and it was kind of slow. And then the last 10, 20 years, the scale of the operation has just dramatically increased. And, you know, now people are like, oh, yeah, I guess there should be lines and pollution and aerosol in the sky, you know, just more planes.
The thing is, Derek, if it's in the sky, it's in your water. It's in your soil. It's in your food.
Right.
It's in you. It's in your pets.
Right.
It's in the tree. It's everywhere. It's everywhere. So if it's in the sky, it's permeated everything. And, you know, again, people have to get their heads wrapped around that. I mean, it's just not something that just hangs up there. What goes up must come down.
Mm-hmm. The thing that you brought up too is the bees, and that's something that it really fascinates me about how they're going extinct, basically, and we're all going to have to end up eating potatoes.
Well, we could save the bees by stopping geoengineering in G5. I mean, we don't have to lose the bees. We're not locked into this. If people accept it and don't object, then we might have to eat potatoes.
Now, are you on their radar, Jolie?
Am I on whose radar?
the bad guys.
I hope so. Maybe they'll learn something. Yeah, I don't know if I am. I don't really worry too much about it because I really care so much about the planet and people, and I don't even think about the other team other than derailing them. And, you know, they're quite vulnerable now. I mean, Carnegie, Bill Gates, New York Times just had an article last week.
Harvard University. Yep, Harvard, right.
Coming out, and they're doing geoengineering, MIT. I mean, do these sound like theorists to you? No, it's just mainstream academics.
The other thing that you asked Jolie if she's on their radar, I can tell you this. One of the things that they do is they have controlled opposition. So they will actually have people in the geoengineering activist community who are actually trying to undermine the people like Jolie and others who are really trying to turn this around. So they will come at it, they will talk about it as if they're in the game, that they're here to help, that they're activists. They'll even do presentations on geoengineering. But when it comes time to when maybe one of the activist groups is getting too close to making something happen, they will jump in and they will either make statements which can derail the message that the other folks have brought forth. In other words, what they try to do is they try to trip it up in a way that will set back the real work that's being done. So there is controlled opposition in the geoengineering movement. Those of us that are in the activist community, we know who they are. But these people are out there. So when you asked Jolie if she's on their radar, from that perspective, she is on their radar because, you know, they're trying to get things pushed forward in Rhode Island, but certain things happen which kind of weird, a little awkward as far as other people participating that weren't invited to participate, but they ended up there. So there's those types of things that go on. So this is how you know that this is really a concerted effort, that this is organized. You know, this is an organized effort to stamp out and to derail the true movement on trying to get geoengineering awareness and geoengineering out of our lives.
Do you think it's possible to rid it?
If we don't try, nothing will happen. But right. I can guarantee you that, see, what's missing is the fourth branch of government, which is the people. And over the last several years, I've gotten to go in and lobby on behalf of the geoengineering and now the 5G. And I'll tell you, the only people that show up to meet with our representatives are the people from these lobbyists that, you know, want to push the bad technology. Where are we? We're not in there, so our voice doesn't get heard. So is it really surprising that we're in the state that we are? You know, and I think it gets frustrating for people because they put their trust, and then, you know, what do we get? Nothing. We get no representation, and we get more geoengineering and just more of the continuum, as you were talking about how policies just kind of follow the continuum. It doesn't really matter who's in the White House or not. So, you know, luckily there's a lot of critical thinkers. I do think that we can derail this if we get into it. I mean, I think that they are trusting that we'll just be too afraid, not get organized, and they're really trying to divide and conquer us. I mean, that's really the key for them, is to keep us divided.
Jolie, why don't you tell Derek a little bit about the fact that a lot of our representatives, they don't know anything about this, and it's an education process when you have to go in there to get them to understand. Basically, it's geoengineering 101. So I think, Derek, what happens is a lot of people believe that everybody that's in the government is not saying anything. They know about it, but they're not saying anything. The truth of the matter is that many of the people, our representatives, the people in Congress, they're as clueless about this as most of the public. Jolie, why don't you just talk about that a little bit? I don't want to take up too much time.
That's a really important point because it's true. A lot of these representatives, and again, with our work with the legislative initiative, we're focusing on our state assembly people, our local reps. We're not even really bothering with the feds because this geoengineering is being governed outside of the context of our U.S. system, okay? And so that's why when we go into our offices and we talk to the people, and yeah, like I had a couple meetings last year and with Maryland representatives, and they are really clued in about the environment and about how important the bees are but the term geoengineering was just like, they couldn't get their mind around it. And to them, it's like any human nature. They don't want to go in front of their peers and look like a total idiot, and not know what they're talking about. So what she said to me was, I want to talk about this. I want to know more about it. But she says, I'm not going to go out on the floor and make a fool of myself, if I don't understand what I'm talking about. So yeah, again, that's part of our role as, during people who are going to stop geoengineering is to get familiar with the geoengineering and be able to go to our representatives and talk with them, write them letters. We've gotten tons of letters through the zerogeoengineering.com website, people sending letters from so many states, and we need more. And that's how we do it, because we're going to get the legislation introduced into each state, I hope. But if it does pass in Rhode Island, which I don't know, it depends on how many calls we make and so forth to support it. But if it does, or if it's passed in any state, it's a health and safety bill, and it's a nonpartisan bill. So it could pass in every state, because that's what they did with the sulfur taken out of diesel fuel in 2008. Like California and Maryland took sulfur out of diesel fuel because it causes asthma and acid rain. And then in 2010, all the states had taken sulfur out of diesel fuel. So, and then our next question would be, so if we took sulfur out of diesel fuel in 2010, why did the geoengineers insist on covering the sun with millions of tons of particulates of sulfur? So again, it's the disconnect. We don't know much about science. We haven't really been involved in governance, but at the end of the day, yes, we can stop this if we just show up, educate ourselves, get our friends who are on board who want to do something about climate, do something to take care of our environment. At the end of the day, solving climate change is very simple. We're not going to solve it, but we can stop pollution. And that'll be pollution not only from the aerosols, but from the electromagnetism, which we're talking about with the towers, which is also included in our legislation, because geoengineering is not only the aerosol dump, but we're talking about the electromagnetism. And so that has to be included.
Derek, one person that knows a whole lot about this is Dennis Kucinich, and I know you know Dennis.
Oh, I was totally going to bring up his name, and I'm like, he's the guy that we need to get involved. Dennis is great. I vote for him every time. Dennis,
in the early 2000s, there was a document, and Jolie could probably get more specific on this than I'm going to get, but it talked about the banning of exotic weapons. And Dennis had written in chemtrails and to ban chemtrails. And what happened was, when that document or that bill, whatever it was at the time, when it got to its final phase, that was taken out. Somebody took it out. Dennis put it in as an exotic weapon, and then when the final draft was making its way to conclusion, chemtrails was taken out. So what does that tell you? It tells you that, number one, Dennis Kucinich knows what chemtrails are, that it's an exotic weapon, and it also tells us that somebody went out of their way to make sure it got taken out, because it's a covert black ops program.
It was HR 2977, and it's called the Space Preservation Act. And I think my understanding was the reason it was thrown out is because it included the term chemtrails, which they claimed was not a court admissible term. And if you know anything about the framework, if you don't have a court admissible term, if you have anything wrong in your bill or document, they'll just toss it out. So, that's why our approach is so specific and designed to stay with the science, stay with the facts, stay with the legal terms. Because Dennis Kucinich, if we had listened to him, if he was president, we would not be in this terrible place that we are now. We would not be getting sprayed with all these chemicals.
What's key here, Derek, is that what Jolie is doing with the legislation is they're not talking about chemtrails. It's called pollution. They're polluting the skies, because there's already, we already have laws on the books about polluting.
And emissions. Emissions is the term they don't want to hear.
Okay, so just so the audience knows that when she was talking about having to use acceptable terms from a legal perspective, that's what you have to do, because if you don't do that, if you're going to take a legal document forward or try to get something made as law, you have to be able to have the legal terminology in its right place. Otherwise, like she said, it's just going to get tossed out.
How does chemtrails get into legalese?
It won't. You can't use the term.
Well,
You have to say, you have to see, because we're not talking about just aerosol dumps. We're talking about the whole science and electromagnetic radiation that is working collaboratively with the aerosols. So that's why we're so set on taking down geoengineering, because that is inclusive of not only the stratospheric aerosol injection, but in all these towers that are going up everywhere that, you know, are the overlapping technology. So that's why it's important to focus and go. I mean, you can go to your state. I mean, I will work with anyone who wants to work. We will just draft a document specific to your state. And it's a very different conversation that you have then, because now you have a legal document. Hopefully you have your lab tests that show that geoengineering is already occurring. And then you just have, you know, say a recent article from the New York Times or MIT from last week about the geoengineering that's going to be happening or that's happening and what they want to do with the sulfur and so on. So we have a very good case, but again, it means that people have to show up to make the baskets. You know, we got the ball, we can toss it to you, but, you know, we just need people to show up and, you know, professionally dressed, show up in a suit with your documents. It's a very different effect that you're going to have on policy making than if you're going to be screaming at someone on the phone or screaming in the street, or, you know, it's all important, but, you know,
you got to play their game.
Changes. Yeah, you got to, I mean, if it's a basketball game, you got to just get in there and make something happen. You can't say, oh, I want to change this rule and I think that this should change. No. I mean, it's already going, and it started in 1947 with these people with the CIA. So, again, none of us were even here when this ball started in motion. That's
right.
Why it's so hard to stop it. You know, it's none of our fault. It's just like, where we have to show up and put a roadblock there and take it out before it takes us out.
Now, back to actual effects on the planet. Now, all these wildfires, are they affected by the? I mean, every day I hear about a new wildfire.
Yeah.
Is it because of them creating drought conditions in certain geographic locations?
Yeah, I mean, I think, I agree. It would be difficult to say exactly what it was, but there's no question that adding aluminum, barium, strontium, and sulfur and other things, and when the trees, you know, when that's covering the trees, that's going to make them catch fire much more. The fires are apparently burning much harder than they were. So, I mean, there's no good effects that are going to happen from adding pollution to our environment.
There is nothing good that is going to come from this, is what you're saying.
Right. That's right. Yeah.
Nothing. For more money for Carnegie and them to give to these people that want to do research experiments on us, you know. And again, they are on a slippery slope, because there's a Nuremberg Code which says clearly that you have to have the consent of the people being experimented on. Guess what? They don't have anyone's consent. And that's why we all need to wake up and weigh in on this, because they're just rolling it out. It's just getting steamrolled. I mean, Harvard said last week, MIT said, Carnegie, they're doing it.
No, I was going to say, that's the thing, Jolie. They're saying that they're going to do it. Now, like I mentioned earlier in the show, whenever they finally come out and say, we're going to do something, you can bet your bottom dollar that it's been in play for a very long time. So Harvard now, I'm on their website right now, Harvard's Solar Geoengineering Research Program. And they have their goals stated and their cross-cutting principles and so on. So, I mean, this is out there now. It's out of the realm of people scratching their head and thinking that it's just a conspiracy. They basically set the stage over the last 20 years, just getting people conditioned and acclimated to looking at the sky and seeing something that really shouldn't be there, then thinking that that's normal. And now, you know, they're going to roll it out and they're going to formalize, the whole approach going forward so that it's no longer covert. It's out there, and you have these academic institutions like Harvard leading the charge. And most people are not going to question something that's coming out of Harvard University. They're just going to say, well, it's a bunch of really smart people. They know what they're doing. They must be doing it for a very good reason. It's not going to hurt us. And so, you know, it's just let it go. It's going to be okay. They'll take care of it.
But we'll never see it on national news due to the people on the news media, as far as that goes, correct?
Well, I just wanted to reference the New York Times article from last week and just read you a little bit about it, about the sulfur aspect. They say for the last few years, the Harvard professor David Keith has been catching this vision. 10 Gulfstream jets outfitted with special engines that allow them to fly safely around the stratosphere at an altitude of 70,000 feet, take off from a runway near the equator. Their cargo includes thousands of pounds of a chemical compound, liquid sulfur, let's say, that can be sprayed as a gas from the aircraft. It is not a one-time event. The flights take place throughout the year, dispersing a load that amounts to 25,000 tons. Okay? So they said it in the New York Times, and again, if we don't strongly object to this, if we don't come out and reject it, and again, because they convinced how much of the population that carbon dioxide is a pollutant with that marketing scam.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? People think that, oh, no, I'm breathing too much, or it's carbon dioxide, it's bad. Well, no, carbon monoxide's bad from your car. You definitely would want to stop that kind of pollution. If we talk about emissions honestly, let's take care of all the emissions. Let's clean up all the fuel, not just on the ground, but, in the air. But again, yeah, we're looking at these programs, and they've been kind of decorated and put behind the curtain of Harvard, but we know that that's really the CIA, and that's really deep state and intelligence stuff.
I think that's really great that you bring up those newspapers who are writing about it, because I told people, well, what's your subject going to be today? I'm like, well, chemtrails. And they're like, well, what? Somebody would be, what's that? And then others would roll their eyes. And I think this conversation I think this is a great conversation, because I had no idea that these newspapers were picking up and running with the story.
Oh, they're going to do so more now, Derek, because, like I said, Harvard has their program and so on. So now they have essentially a blank check to start writing about this stuff. And by the way, anybody out there that is hearing this and you're rolling your eyes, you better get with the program. I tell you what, I'm going to go on my soapbox a little bit, but I'm sick and tired of people that are basically just have their heads stuck in the ground and denying that this is taking place. It's unbelievable to me that, you can't look at the sky and see what's going on. So, I mean, I know I'm probably going to get some hate mail for that, but, Derek, I'm at the point where I don't care anymore. I don't care.
Sure.
Because it's going on. I think with this show, we have really putting a lot of stuff out there, a lot of fact-based conversation, which says that it is happening and it is going to continue to happen unless everybody wakes up. And by the way, if you're rolling your eyes, just get out of the way. Get out of our way. Okay? And just let the people that want to do something engage.
Stay on your soapbox briefly. Let me tell you that I can see who's listening to this radio broadcast around the world. Germany's listening. San Diego is listening. Calgary's listening. Virginia's listening. Texas is listening. New York is listening, along with tons of Ohio people. So you're reaching not just Cleveland, Ohio airwaves. You're reaching a broader audience with this subject.
No, and that's why, Derek, we are so appreciative. Jolie and I were talking about this before we got on. We are so appreciative of the fact that you invited us on to talk about this, because a lot of times, we do this through my show and other shows. It's YouTube based, but to get it on, a terrestrial radio station is a big, big deal. And, we really want to thank you for having us on.
Oh, I totally appreciate it. Now, what are websites where people can contact you and yell at you?
Jolie, why don't you give your websites, because your websites are very targeted for this.
Oh, yeah. Thank you so much. You want to go to zerogeoengineering.com or 05G.com. And the 5G one, the 05G is new because, again, we are getting the deployment of this technology, and we have to oppose it. We have to reject it. So, yeah, Derek, thank you so much for inviting me on here. It's been a pleasure to speak with you both.
Oh, I definitely appreciate it. And Mike, how can people get a hold of you and yell at you?
Yeah, well, I have a hub website. Just go to www.sageofquay, that's Quay, sageofquay.com. And from there, you'll be able to go to my YouTube channel, my blog, and my Mixcloud channel, and all the other social media, Facebook, that I have available. And I do a lot of posts and shows on geoengineering. And you can take a listen to those. In fact, Jolie and I did a show together about 2 or 3 weeks ago where she talks about the legislation that she's trying to push forth in Rhode Island. I would suggest that the audience, if you're interested, please listen to that show.
Do you know of any organizations in Ohio?
Actually, no.
Well, let's do this. Anybody who's listening that's in the Cleveland and the Ohio area, go to Jolie's website, contact Jolie.
Yeah,
If
please.
you're willing to help, connect, and she'll get you oriented and acclimated and on your way to helping us out. Like you were saying, collecting the rainwater. Which, if you're interested in doing this and chemtrails or geoengineering is something that you think is an important issue, and it is an important issue, contact Jolie through her website, and we'll get the ball rolling.
Great. Well, hey, I definitely appreciate you two taking out the time to come down here and talk on my Overrated Radio show. Mike has been on several times, and we've had some really good conversations. And Jolie, I appreciate you coming on and checking us out.
Well, thank you, Derek.
Thanks. It's been a pleasure.
Give out those websites one more time.
Geoengineering.com and 05G.com.
And mine is Sage of Quay, SAGEOFQUAY, sageofquay.com.
Okay, great. Hey, thanks a lot, folks. And you have a good day.
Thank you.
All right, Derek, thank you. Bye-bye. And that concludes another Sage of Quay interview, and I hope you enjoyed the discussion as much as I did. Links to my guests' websites and social media are listed in the show notes below. And as always, I'd like to thank everyone for listening and visiting the blog. You can get to the blog by typing in sageofquayradio.blogspot.com or simply head over to our hub website at sageofquay.com. Also, if you get a moment, please visit laboroflovemusic.com to listen to my album, Leaving Dystopia. And remember, live in truth and always serve creation. It's really that simple. See everyone next week. Be safe, enjoy, and God bless.